On this episode of the John 1911 Podcast, the incredible Army-Navy game, FN releases the SCAR pistol, the USS Fallujah is announced, and the Hooker and the Rolex. Okay, good evening, everybody. This is the episode 282 of the John 1911 Podcast. This is going to be another solo episode. It is, what time is it? It's after 11 o'clock on Wednesday night, which is very late for me. So, Danny is out. He is also he's on some short-term leave. He's has to have a small medical procedure, and so he's in he's in quite a lot of pain and uncomfortable. But I know he's listening to this, and I hope you get well soon, Danny. Also, I guess in administrative notes, we need to mention that we have a new contributor to the John 1911 website, the Kraken. That is what he will be known as. I haven't told him yet personally, but I fully expect that he will be known as Crack. It's kind of how it goes. Welcome to Kraken. He is a precision rifle guy. I would say that's his biggest strength, precision rifle guy. And it's going to be nice to have another precision rifle guy around here. So welcome to the Kraken. Welcome him. He's got an introductory post on the website. Many of you have seen it. He bought the latest and greatest Zeiss. It's like a 3 to 20 or 3 to 25. It's this scope that I guess was really ideally made for the 22 long rifle precision matches, but people really like this thing, and he went out and got one, so because he can use it. So I'm pretty curious about it. I'm not in the market right now for any glass, other than one for a French sniper rifle, which is another story for another day. It'll be kind of neat to see what he gets into and the stuff he has. And also he lives much farther west than, the John 1911 Armory is based in the Ohio Valley, and Kraken lives way west of the Mississippi. So, he's got access to some pretty long ranges out there, I think. I mean, here basically for anything, approaching extreme long range for us, the John 1911 range is really a 600-yard range. We can fake 7. We need to build out our range more to get it. We were initially going to build it out to 1,000 yards, but that may not happen. We might just push it another 100 or 200 and call it a day. But to get 1,000 or maybe to a mile, we basically have to go to Camp Atterbury in Indiana or Thunder Valley up in I would say mid-east Ohio on the Pennsylvania border. So Kraken, I think, has a lot more access to longer ranges than we do. So it'll be interesting to see what he comes up with and what he does and what's in his collection and kind of the things that are going on. So it's that time of the year again, and the Army-Navy game took place on Saturday, and what a finish that was. So those of you that know, I'm not personally a big sports person, especially like the NFL and Major League Baseball, and then you get all the kneeling and all the political stuff that they they put in the sports over the past 4 or 5 years. And I can say that I could sit here and tell you that I'll never forgive them, but the truth is I wasn't their customer anyway. I could give you an example. Every Sunday when I'm doing maintenance on the range, I'm on the way back in, and I give Doc a call, and Doc will basically be like, I can't talk right now, I'm watching a football game. And every Sunday I forget there's a football game. So the Army-Navy game is worth watching because no matter what the score is, my policy is the winner is America. And you got 2 teams. I mean, there's a lot of other service academies, but you got these 2 teams. You got I call them kids. I'm in my 50s, but I've spent some time with members from, I'm not going to say which academy, from a service academy, and they are amazing. If you're the kind of person that buys into this argument that millennials or whatever they call themselves now, and the younger generation, they don't do this and they don't do that, and they lack this and they lack that, you're just hanging around the wrong kids, because they're out there. There's kids that are hungry. There's kids that are smart. There's kids that are bright. There's kids that are inquisitive. There's kids that are, they are motivated. And you don't get into a service academy about being all of that. Like, they're just incredible people. So I don't root for an individual team. What I'll typically do, because people will ask, who are you rooting for? And, I'll say this. My loyalties will generally, I will kind of root for the team that maybe is having a tougher go of it. Like, for example, the U.S. Military Academy West Point, they had lost, I think it was 8 years in a row to Navy. And so, at some point you're like, man, I hope Army can pull it out this year, because you just, you feel bad. But then once that kind of settles in, you kind of, the day of the game, I'll pick whatever I want to pick. Or even if I don't pick, I root for both sides. I just want a good game. I don't want anyone to get hurt. The Army-Navy game this year went into double overtime, which has never happened before. And those double overtime, basically from about the last, I would say, 2 minutes of the fourth quarter, and the double overtime was one of the most, probably in my memory, the most amazing Army-Navy game I've ever seen. And it was just a shocker. It was just things were happening, and kids were breaking out and, scoring touchdowns, and balls getting knocked down losing the ball at the 2-yard line. And I mean, it was a squeak. It was just unreal. And so, if you haven't heard, congratulations on Army on winning. I feel bad for Navy, because it was kind of a heartbreaking loss, because they had kind of, for a while there, they thought they were going to have it. And in particular, my thought, if you saw the game, my thoughts go out to a particular midshipman who had the ball knocked out of his possession at I'd say about the 2-yard line. And if you follow the game, and you follow the ball, and you follow the action, and you follow whatever, but if you happen to notice that young man and his what he felt like after losing that ball, and subsequently, because they were so close to winning the game, he was real broken up. And my heart just went out to him, because the service academies, they're leaders of the future in the military. And, you can make all the arguments about the ring knockers and all the other kind of stuff, and, and warriors and war and where these people can go, and the responsibilities they'll have and challenges they'll face. But, at the end of the day, in that one moment, he was just a young man in his college, the most important college football game of his career, I would imagine. I think he was probably a senior. Maybe he wasn't. Certainly the most important game for the institution, important game of the year. And, just the way the ball fell. I mean, it just kind of way it happened. It wasn't his fault. He didn't do anything wrong. The other side just kind of got the better of him and knocked it away. And he was so distraught that my heart went out to him. And I know I sound like kind of a pussy right now, but I guess maybe as I get older, I hope you're doing okay. And, it's just a game. It was a hell of a game. And things like that happen, and you can grow from them, and you can learn from them, and they can be lessons. They don't have to be an albatross around your neck. So congratulations to Army. Good luck to Navy next year, and make it a great game. Oh, and lest we forget, we had some people on social media, and you can tell these guys, and again, I'm not a big sports guy, so I'm not going to sit here and tell, like, I know all this, I know all this stuff. Like, the reality is I don't know that much about football. Like, I mean, I know how football works. I mean, I know when someone hits a home run, like, what that means. But it was a joke. But, like wide receiver, tight end, like, I know what a quarterback is. I'm not that guy. Okay, but, you can see people, but, I understand the game. I enjoy the game. I enjoy the pageantry. I enjoy a bunch of people that I respect coming into a sporting endeavor, and, they're brothers in arms, but for one day, for that one game, for that hour or whatever that is, it's a rivalry. And I really appreciate that. And people were coming in and they were saying, well, it's not that important because they're still going to not be playing for the Commander's Cup, which is a thing that was made so the service academies could have some kind of trophy, to have with the best score. And, it's not for nothing, but the Army-Navy game is the game. If you don't understand how important the Army-Navy game is to those schools and football, really Army-Navy and a lot of the competitions, but the Army-Navy football game, think of it like I know Ohio State and Michigan, like that's a game. Or if UK basketball team doesn't win the national championship, they'll fire their coaches. So, a service academy could go 0 for whatever, as long as they win the Army-Navy game, that's all that counts. And to prove the point, just so you at home can understand, as soon as the game was over and the team went to the locker rooms, the the athletic director of the Navy came in and fired the coach. Now it wasn't because of losing to Army that year. I mean, he'd lost a bunch of games to Army, but it had been festering. Their record wasn't good the past couple of years. He led Navy on, this particular coach had led Navy on their big run over Army for 8 years. So, I mean, it was, he had his time, but obviously things had been sliding to the point that the administration had decided, I don't know, like maybe if he had won, they would have fired him that day, or maybe they would have fired him over the summer. But I thought it was interesting. Army-Navy game's over. They're in the locker room. It's 10, 15 minutes later, AD comes in and goes, hey dude, appreciate everything you've done, but it's time to move on. So if you think the Commander's Cup means shit to anybody, the Army-Navy game is the only game, which is why I personally like to watch it. A couple other things. We've had someone ask now with the change over at Twitter with Elon Musk, will we be operating our Twitter account anytime soon? And the answer is hell no. The lessons that were learned from us about Twitter, and I don't want to rehash all this, but basically there's a bunch of people on Twitter that don't really want to hear what we have to say. And I don't want to tell them what we have to say. I'd rather speak to you, the person that's listening to this podcast. If you're our target, you're our demographic, you're our interest group, you're gun people, like, what's the girl? I think I've told the story on the podcast. We've been banned. It's actually, I talk about not planning. This is actually true and not related to the Army-Navy game. We were banned. We were blocked on Twitter by the West Point Department of History, a true story, and we were blocked on Twitter by the redheaded woman, the comedian who had the decapitated head of Donald Trump. It's not Ellen DeGeneres, whatever her name is. It's terrible because I kind of like her comedy, but we were blocked by both those two groups or people on Twitter, and we were blocked on the comedian blocked us because we're gun people, and West Point Department of History blocked us because we criticized them for taking their students for some kind of Hispanic Heritage Day to eat Taco Bell. Yes, that really happened. I'm sure it's still on Twitter. Don't take my word for it. Go look it up. But yeah, they blocked, the Department of History, West Point blocked us for that. It's not the venue for us, and I suspect it's not the venue for a lot of you. So no, we're not going to be on it. I don't think Twitter is really redeemable. I mean, I realize it has a place. It's interesting with all the stuff coming out with, the blocking and the Trump and the de-amplification and whatever the terminology they're using. That's more of a political subject, and we'll talk about that with Danny, my chief political correspondent, when he's back on pod. But no matter what happens with Twitter, I don't really foresee us getting back on Twitter. our biggest priority for social media is obviously our website, John1911.com, and, video content and podcasting. That's where we are. We're just not interested in Twitter. Changing gears here, a couple personal things. The first one is I'm always open to, interesting 1911. We had a guy approach us wanting to know if we wanted to purchase, I'm not going to say the manufacturer of the gun because there's no point. It's a custom shop company, and it was a 1911, and it was a commander size, and it was in a caliber known as 9x23. And if you're not familiar with that, there's a 9x19 is, 9mm parabellum, as you would call it. And there's 9x21. There's 9x23. 9x23 is, this isn't really the proper way to put it, but it would be fair to call that like the European 38 Super. I just kind of made that up. And I'm like, yeah, 1911, different calibers. It's already a platform we support. It's no different than the Glocks, right? 40 caliber Glocks, 9mm caliber Glocks, 10mm Glocks, 357 SIG Glocks, whatever caliber Glock size, whatever. If you're a Glock guy and, you already kind of support that gun, you've got holsters, it all works out. Until something came up and blocked and stopped us in our tracks. And it had been a long time since we talked about it. The gun in question, the 9x23, 1911, the person had wanted to sell us was bobtailed. And I was like, oh, shit. And I bowed out on it. And I guess I'll say it publicly. I've owned multiple bobtailed 1911s, especially when they first came out. They originated with Ed Brown. He has the patent. He probably still holds the actual patent. Holds the patent on the design, on the actual angle and the cut. I think Kimber and some other companies have tried to do their own version at different angles, and here and there. But we had some, all these advantages. We bought them. People talked about them. They don't print or supposedly with your hands. Maybe they fit better. It took about 10 years to figure it out, but for me personally, the bobtailed guns just swirl around in my hand too much. If you think about leverage in physics, and you think about the length of the lever, which would be the pistol grip, the point of highest leverage is down there in that bottom corner over the mainspring housing. Well, if you chop that off, you kind of getting rid of that leverage. And I noticed bobtailed guns really scroll around in my hand more. Like I realized ergonomically shooting and recoil and the sight picture and the sight movement as you're operating it, I hate them. Like it just kills me. Like I don't hate them is not the right word, but we're against them. I don't much care for them. I know it's a custom feature. My opinion is in the long run, bobtailed guns will fall out of favor and they will decline in value because they are bobtailed. In particular, especially people that are bobtailing these 5-inch guns, because then they even look front end top heavy. So if you're on the fence on a bobtail and you're just one of those, because a lot of you 1911 guys, come on, let's be real. You just do shit to these guns just so you can add more bling to it. You don't do it because it actually adds anything to the gun. It's just more shit to put onto the build sheet. And if you're not in love with a bobtail, you can miss that. Because I promise you, if you ever go to sell it, and a lot of you 1911 guys sell your guns, there will be a certain subset of 1911 owners who they're not going to be buying those bobtails. One more personal note from local stories, and this is just a personal bugaboo, and it's in reference to in reference to police chiefs in mid-sized cities, and this probably happens to a lot of these mid-sized cities, but in particular, I'm going to talk about the city of Cincinnati because it's the city that I'm most familiar with and the police department I'm most familiar with. So the city of Cincinnati is the major metropolitan city in my region where John 1911 Armory is. The city of Cincinnati proper is 300,000 some residents in the city, located in Hamilton County. The tri-state region, Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, we have around 2 million plus people, but but the city of Cincinnati is a dominant entity in our region, economically, politically, and news and culturally. And so, there's a roughly 1,000 officers at any time on the Cincinnati Police Department. I think it goes down to 900. Sometimes it might go up to 1,100. It's a roughly 1,000-man police department. And what's happened is Cincinnati went through a lot of the drama 20-some years ago that you're seeing in other cities, like, Ferguson or riots and all this other kind of stuff. Cincinnati, we went through all this literally 25 years ago. And it was terrible. I mean, it frankly was terrible. And so, you get a lot of people coming in to city government that have all these new ideas and are not really based in reality. And, and to their credit, you have to admit some of it worked, but in my opinion, some of it doesn't. And one of the things that doesn't work is the city of Cincinnati. After there was a chief at the time of these riots, it was around 2001, 2003, maybe. Definitely, it's fair of 2001. There were riots. Yeah. So, chief was named Tom Stryker, Chief Stryker, and so Stryker was chief of police and 1,000-member police department, roughly, and he's a career Cincinnati police officer. He did his whole career CPD, worked his way up through the ranks, and became chief of police. Incidentally, the chief of police for the city of Cincinnati wears full bird colonel emblems on his collar, not 4 or 5 stars. I'll come back to that in a minute. So when the riots happened and a lot of hand-wringing, a lot of things. And one of the things they decided to do when Stryker retired, the city government decided, hey, we're going to open up our police department to a new chief. We're not going to promote from within. Well, they can't say we're not going to promote from within, but they're going to be like, well, let's open it up to a national hiring. Let's get the most qualified and and nationally the best chief you can that's available to make the city better. And there's 2 motivations for this. One, it's this idea. In my opinion, this is my opinion. This isn't fact. And if you are a city government type person, or you're not going to agree with this. But to me, it politicizes the chief's position more than it needs to be. And it also, what it does is it creates a situation where potentially you have somebody coming in as chief of police that has no connection to the community, has no connection to the officers, has no connection to the history, to the neighborhoods, to the issues, who the power players are, for good or ill. Like every place has there's people with power that may not show up on a command structure list, but there are people that they're influential, but an outsider coming in is not going to know this or is going to step on this and cause problems. And the motivation for doing these outside police chiefs is, to me, it's insecurity. Cincinnati has this super insecure, like they're this, and this is not what I don't believe this, but this is how they'll act. They'll act like, they're backwards, small town, little police department, and, Hollywood, New York, NYPD, LAPD, these large cities, Atlanta, Chicago, with large police departments, Houston, big, they get all the media coverage and they get all the money and all the glory, and they do have problems, but they feel like those people are on another level, and we're just this small little town with a small little police department. And so what they did is they opened it up, and so the first person that they hired was a guy many of you have heard of. His name was James Craig, and James Craig is the first I would call these gypsy chiefs. And the gypsy chiefs, James Craig is, most of you that listen to this podcast, if you watch Fox News, you're like, who's that James Craig guy? He's the chief of police that was up in Detroit, and he just recently had to step down. He got term limited or retired, mandatory retirement. But James Craig, we put out the national list, and James Craig's a very impressive guy. And I think he hit. If I had to off top, I think he started in L.A. as his patrol. I think he worked his way up to something in L.A. Police Department, and then went on the national circuit with these called Gypsy Chiefs. Ended up in Portland, Maine, as a police chief in Portland, Maine, not Portland, Oregon, Portland, Maine, and was very impressive. But an opportunity came, and he got a promotion, and he took the Cincinnati police chief's job. And so the people in Portland, Maine had hired this guy from the outside. He turned around and left, came to Cincinnati, and, he was impressive and a national guy and got a lot of press and got a lot of coverage. Also, he decided when he was police chief and he's going around all the police chief meetings, or he's on national TV talking about being a police chief, he didn't want to have a little colonel on his collar. He wanted he didn't put 1 star, because a 1 star isn't the chief of police in LA. He put, I think it was 5 stars. He put the 5 stars, like General of the Army 5-star, Fleet Admiral kind of thing on his collar. And it's just like, oh, fuck. So anyway, he leaves Portland. He's not there forever. Comes to Cincinnati. Cincinnati's like, yeah, we got this great police chief. And, he was okay. He wasn't here that long until the opportunity to become the chief of police in Detroit popped up. And turns out that's where he's from. And so his motivation to come to Cincinnati was, it's not that far from Detroit, and that's where his family's from, maybe his parents, and it's his hometown, and he could go up there. So Cincinnati had, we hired this guy and this gypsy chief, and he's out of here in a few years. And, it just kind of left everybody hanging in, holding the bag. This is literally just like these coaches at these schools. You get some mid-sized school and they get a winning record, and all of a sudden, bam, the coach is gone. He's going to go coach at Alabama or something, right? So they put out another Cincinnati. Now has got to look for another one of these gypsy chiefs. And so they got to hire national, because they're not going to do local, because that's what we do now. And they got this guy, Blackwell, who was up the road from Columbus, Ohio. Long story short, Blackwell basically got fired. Blackwell would say he quit. People would say he got he was fired, or maybe more appropriately, run off. There was a lot of disagreements. He wasn't here a lot. He liked to go to conventions and wear those 5 stars. He really enjoyed that. And there was some discrepancy over how he was, travel expenses and all this other kind of stuff. And so he's another one of these gypsy chiefs. He doesn't care about Cincinnati. They end up having to write that dude a big-ass check to get rid of him. And it's like, son of a bitch. Like, for 150 years, Cincinnati is hired from within. And so they've had 2 of these gypsy chiefs, and it's like they had to fire Blackwell. So then they were like, we need, we need an interim chief. So they had to name an interim chief. And with Elliot Isaac was, I think at the time, here in Cincinnati, he was a like assistant chief. I can't remember which. Lieutenant Colonel, we would call him here at Cincinnati, because, Colonel is the chief, right, instead of the 5 stars. So Elliot Isaac is the interim chief. He's well-liked, here for a long time. He doesn't hurt that he's black, because, Stryker, when this all started, my stories was white, Craig's black, Blackwell's black. Now Elliot Isaac, at least he's Cincinnati. Everybody knows him. He spent his career here. He's well-liked. He's well-respected. And he's chief in Cincinnati. So Elliot Isaac is coming to the point where he's actually retiring. And it's like, here we go again. He, instead of getting fired or leaving, he's legit like, I'm hanging it up. I'm 35 years in, or whatever he's been doing. I'm out. So what are they going to do? Are they going to do the national bullshit again? And so they supposedly did a national thing, and they put it out there, and they had an interim chief. It was a woman. Her name is Teresa, Theetgee, and she was lieutenant colonel, assistant chief, interim chief. They ended up just making her chief. And by the way, Isaac, when he became chief, who was the career Cincinnati police officer, and Teresa Theetgee here, whatever her name is, they're back to wearing the full bird colonels. on their collar, not that bullshit, looking like your goddamn general in the army horse shit. So congratulations to Cincinnati and finally waking up to the reality that you are a major police department. Your officers are as experienced and are as busy and are as good as any officer from LA or Chicago or New York, and I would say better. Okay? You see as much crime, you see as much serious issues, serious police work. You don't need to go out and hire these goddamn gypsy chiefs. Hire from within. You're good enough. How's it go? You're good enough, you're special enough, and you matter, or whatever that thing is, right? To feel good about yourself. Finally, Cincinnati's grown up, grown from within. You're a major police department. Stop hiring the gypsy chiefs. And if you don't care about Cincinnati, think about this in your hometown the next time your city needs to hire a police chief. Shoo, glad I got that off my chest. I have strong opinions about, gypsy chiefs. So, you know what? Let's go ahead and run through some of these real quick, get in and out of here. Industry news, state of Ohio, where that Blackwell guy came from, Columbus, has a communist kind of, I don't know, they're communists, but they're these anti-gun city, whatever group, and they're trying to pass some anti-gun laws. I think they're trying to ban 30 caliber magazines or greater and some other stuff. And we have a law in Ohio that we passed a few years ago for basically is it called the preemption? So it says cities and townships cannot pass gun laws that are more restrictive than what the state has. And so we fought to have this changed statewide, or because we had to fight to get all of our gun rights back here in Ohio. So super interesting story. Some politician up there in Columbus is like, screw Marky down there, John1911. We're banning the 30-round magazines and whatever we want to do. Fuck you and the horse you guys rode in on. Well, the Ohio Attorney General for the state of Ohio, immediately goes into court and files a TRO against the city of Columbus and asks a judge, basically say, you better stop this shit because we have a law that says they can't do it. And they apparently got a TRO. So, we'll see how it's fought out. But it's nice to have an Attorney General for the state of Ohio stepping in for gun owners and gun rights and the law and, backing us up. Also in other news, I thought it was interesting, FN, the maker of the SCAR rifles, we have a SCAR 16, right? They're coming out with a pistol. We've seen these subgun SCARs for years. I saw a subgun SCAR 10 or 12 years ago, working. And so I guess FN USA has now announced that they're going to come out with a SCAR pistol 5.56. So you can either get a brace or SBR it, but it's probably got like an 8-inch barrel. I'm not sure, but it looks really small. And they're calling it the SCAR 15P. So unless it was a typo, because I have a SCAR 16s, but they're calling this a SCAR 15P. Maybe it's a 16P, but I swear it said 15P. So thought that was interesting. Might be worth getting if you want to SBR a SCAR. I mean, I know like if we were going to SBR our SCAR 16, you were going to have to change some of the gas stuff with like Parker Mountain Machine. And, it kind of maybe makes sense to just get something factory, right? I think it's pretty cool. In further political news, or industry news, up there in Canada, if you don't think gun laws are about taking everybody's gun rights away, you need to, it hasn't got a lot of press here in the U.S., but you got to see the proposed gun law or bills or however it works up there, for the subjects, for the king up there in Canada. But their list to next round of gun bans, it's like 300 pages long. It's got a Ruger #1 on it, the falling block rifle. It's got Ruger 1022s on it. I mean, it's got bolt action rifles. You guys are fucked up there in Canada. It's, this isn't about safety or whatever. I mean, they're going after, if it's a bolt action rifle, it's a sniper rifle. If it's a Ruger #1, it's a high powered rifle. They're just going after it all. And I don't know what's going to happen to Canada, but I seem to remember in my lifetime, Canada had a vote about possibly breaking up. Most listeners to this podcast would not recall this, but this is within my lifetime because, English-speaking Canada, which is the western side of Canada, and maybe more French Canada on the eastern side, they might have some cultural differences. You can make an argument that Western Canada is more Wild West, definitely more in common with, say, Montana and Wyoming. And I don't know. I mean, you have to watch it. Maybe one day, maybe you'll see some kind of movement again in Canada to maybe that country's going to fall apart. And I don't know, maybe these Western territories in Canada, maybe they'll become their own country, or maybe they'll seek membership with another country. I don't know who that would be, but I have an idea. And we're going to go quick on these. In world news, if you heard about the NHL, NHL had a somehow they got this together, an all trans hockey game, and so they filmed it and they were really promoting it, and it was full of women that were transing as men, and then how did it go? So women transing as men, and then men who had trans to women. So long story short, you had biological males and biological females playing hockey with each other, and it didn't take all but about 30 seconds until somebody got their shit knocked out and got a major concussion. And now suddenly you can't find this story worth a search warrant. And the NHL, they dropped it like a hot potato. So just saying, like, you could have seen that one coming. Interesting news out of the Navy. Secretary of Navy has announced that the next Navy amphibious warship, the amphibs you call them, is going to be named after the Marine Corps battle from Iraq, the USS Fallujah. So, time marches on. So, Fallujah was a headline, and now Fallujah is going to be up there with, Way City, and you've got the other amphibs named after Marine Corps battles. So very interesting. Kind of fun news. There a shipping container out on the West Coast, a cargo ship lost some shipping containers in rough seas, and one of these shipping containers apparently was full of Yeti coolers, and people are apparently making quite a bit of money going out and finding these Yeti coolers washed up all along up in the northwest coast of the United States. They're showing up in Alaska, as far down as Oregon, and they're Yeti coolers. They're fine. Some of them might look a little banged up, but they're generally in good shape and perfectly sellable. I've seen pictures of them. It's pretty neat. And what was interesting is at least one or two of these have now been detected floating off the coast of Hawaii. So, a Yeti cooler closed, probably floats anyway. There could be cool ass Yeti coolers floating around the Pacific Ocean for the next 10 years. So, another interesting story. This is a Ukraine related story. I don't know if this is more of, you have to watch these kinds of stories. This could be more of a disinformation kind of thing. Even if it's true, the fact that it would be released to the public, you have to keep in mind that it could be a disinformation campaign to destabilize, smoke out, or cause drama on the other side of the story. And this story in particular is referencing the idea that Vladimir Putin has plans to flee Russia if shit goes sideways. And that probably is true. Supposedly, I think there's aircraft staged and some other things, that steps they've taken. I don't know. They were thinking, like, where could he run to? And they were like, well, I think Syria's on the list. You've always heard Syria, maybe, possibly, maybe some country, possibly Iran, or maybe some country like Qatar, possibly. Not really sure with that one. But, these are the kind of stories where it's interesting to read them because you don't know if it's just made up bullshit, if it's real, but the Russians don't want that getting out, or if it's real and, we're letting it known. So he can be discredited among his cronies because, these kinds of stories, if you're a general or an oligarch or whatever, and Putin's got an exit plan and he punches out, what happens to your ass? You see how this becomes very destabilizing? Or it's not true at all, but the oligarchs and the generals or whatever, they don't know if it's true or not. They're like, I bet that motherfucker does have a plan. What's going to happen to me? And so you don't know what this is, but it's worth noting that the story's out there and, to see what happens in the future. Now for the political section, and I'm going to hit Republicans and Democrats equally because y'all deserve it. So unfortunately, Republicans are going to go first. So I wish Danny was here. We'll definitely talk about this when he's back in the office, chief political correspondent. There's a story on a website called The Grio, THEGRIO.com. We'll have a link in the show notes to the story. And in my opinion, this story is more of an autopsy of everything that was wrong with Herschel Walker and running for Senate in Georgia. And again, I'm not a football guy, so I kind of know the name. I'm like, Herschel Walker, like the Heisman, like from the 70s or 80s, whatever that was. It's a name I know, but I couldn't tell you what Herschel Walker did. Like if Herschel Walker was a quarterback or kicker, I literally have no idea. But he was chosen supposedly by Trump, name recognition, celebrity, because this is how Trump this is Trump's biggest weakness. Is Trump is a celebrity, so he zeroes in on celebrities. It's all name recognition for him. And they talked this Herschel Walker guy into running for Senate in Georgia. And the arguments were making, can make sense on paper. Name recognition, hometown hero, probably has some kind of business. I mean, he hasn't played football, obviously, in forever. Probably successful businessman, upstanding member of the community. You could yada, yada, yada. You don't have to spend a lot of money trying to teach, some dude like me doesn't know shit about football, or this, whatever grassroots candidate, their name. I'm like, even I've heard of Herschel Walker, which that has its own intrinsic value in politics. You can't deny it. However, a cursory look into Herschel Walker's background and his history would have put up just a modicum of oppo research that you would run on your own candidates. This is part of the vetting process. The vetting process, like when you choose a vice president or your candidates, is you run oppo research on yourself. What's all the nasty shit we can dig up on you? And Herschel Walker is fucking terrible. It is the idea that I could run for Senate is so laughable because of my lack of experience and my resume. Let's just call it what it is. I crush Herschel Walker. I didn't think it would be possible that I could, who could I beat for a U.S. Senate seat? I could apparently beat Herschel Walker. And if you want to know the details about Herschel Walker and this dumpster fire of his campaign, check this article out. It's worth reviewing. Now, let's talk about the Democrats up there in Oregon. Governor of Oregon, Kate Brown, decides in her last month in office, because she's a lib and she wants to virtue signal and, send a message and whatever, all this virtue stuff that she wants to do. She commutes. There's 17 death row inmates in the state of Oregon, and she commutes all the death row inmates to life in prison, I guess, or whatever she did. Probably life in prison. And, this is some big virtue signaling thing. And I think this is an example of how our politics is so screwed up. Herschel Walker, it's all screwed up. But Kate Brown, it's screwed up because this is so selfish. This is a woman. The idea of a governor issuing a pardon for death row is a stopgap to right a wrong, to catch something that fell through the cracks, extenuating circumstances, to do whatever. I think Governor Brown and a lot of Democrats should really spend a lot of time reading understanding the concept of crime and punishment and why we have a judicial system. Because we have a judicial system not because racism or to score points on the other political party. We have a judicial system in this country and a law and a system of laws of crime and punishment, so we don't have a bunch of people running around like vigilantes taking revenge on people committing heinous crimes, because it tears society apart. And people like Governor Kate Brown in Oregon are psycho idiots to do stuff like this. This is the singularly most selfish political act I have seen in modern history, what this woman has done, because it's all about her and it's all about how she thinks and virtue signaling and whatever. It's not about her job. It's not about society. It's not about her state. It's not about her constituents. It's not about her culture. It's not about the foundations of Western civilization. It's all about her. And, you know, Herschel Walker is a bad candidate, and Kate Brown is just as bad. And we're sliding in quick to an hour, so let's get her on. So, hunting segment. We're going to have a link up on the website, because this is an amazing story, because it's got video, and you've got to see this video. State of Hawaii spear fishermen. You know, people that go, you know, they go down a little spear, and they, you know, I think it's like a crossbow kind of thing, or a rubber band, you know, single, you know, shoots a little arrow, and, you know, with a rope on it or string on it, and you can, you know, grab fish or, you know, whatever it is you're supposed to get down there, and then you take it up and you can eat it, right? And, you know, sometimes you'll see stories of like sharks or big other fish coming in and taking the catch or whatever. So this guy, he's underwater, and you watch the video, and he's looking around, and you start to hear this rumble, and you don't realize what it is. Like, you know, you're just like, you don't really pay attention to it watching the video. And he's looking up, and you can see the surface of the water. He's looking around, he's looking straight ahead, and he's coming up, and he comes up right to the surface of the water. And just as he breaks the surface, he's got a camera on his forehead. There is a bow of a boat racing right towards his face. And he's like, oh shit. And what's amazing is, in the water, if you watch it in slow motion, and I promise you I've done this frame by frame, you can't see the boat coming, but you can hear it. And so he goes up, and you just got to see this video. Apparently the Coast Guard says that this particular spear fisherman broke a bunch of rules. He was spearfishing alone, didn't have a buddy. He was supposed to put a buoy up so the boats can see that there's boats have to stay 200 yards away, or, go real slow around these buoys, but this guy was just out in the middle of whatever, and he's spearfishing and almost got run over by a civilian in a boat. I thought that was pretty interesting. This is like a football themed episode. In the pop culture segment, those of you who will know, I thought this was hilarious. There's a football coach named Bill Belichick, and I'm choosing this because I know some of the people involved. So Bill Belichick, is he the Patriots? I think, right? I mean, I really don't know. I think he's the Patriots. He, I guess, at one point got to choose who was going to be on his all-star team to, maybe it's the AFL, what is it? I can't remember. Whatever the East-West Coast, they're at all-star break, and whenever they're all for the Pro Bowl. Maybe it's the Pro Bowl team. See, all-star. I think, I'm not your guy. Okay. So anyway, he apparently chooses a particular player. Hey, you're going to be on the team. And this particular player at the time was dating Pamela Anderson. And they show up at this hotel. I think it's in Hawaii or somewhere, wherever it was. And apparently Bill Belichick's like, where's your girlfriend? Where's Pamela Anderson? He's like, she didn't come, coach. And he's like, why the fuck do you think I chose you? So basically, it turns out Bill Belichick chose this guy to be on this the Pro Bowl team, because he wanted to see Pamela Anderson, and Bill Belichick was pissed off. And you would think, you're like, there's no way this kind of stuff happens. There's just no way. Well, apparently it's been corroborated by 3 or 4 different people. And, hey, I mean, Pamela Anderson, buddy. I mean, there was a day, let me tell you. Now it's time for the police blotter. And this is going to get progressively better. That's kind of the way I organize it, so just bear with me. The first one, this is a very serious situation. So it has now come out 5 electricity substations in Oregon and Washington have been shot up by vandals of some kind to disrupt power because, reasons, anarchy, whatever, right? And, this is bad. 5 of them. So there's a bunch of people somewhere in Oregon and Washington don't have power, right? And it is getting to be winter, right? So this is the kind of ghetto shit that happens in like fucking Iraq. I mean, or in Afghanistan. This is bad. I don't care what your political persuasion is. I would assume up in Oregon and Washington, this is going to be lefty hippies. I would assume, could be wrong, but probably not. Well, where'd they get the idea from? A couple days earlier, 2 substations, electrical substations, were shot up in North Carolina, right in the middle of some kind of trans parade or function in some town that apparently, got all kinds of people really upset. Okay, fine, especially if it's involving kids, like, come on. But it looks like by the comments that were made by some of the people involved that the anti-trans people went out and shot these substations up to kill the power. And, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Like, none of this shit is good, and, if you're thinking about getting a generator for your house, it might be something to consider, because ideas are like viruses, and now people realize you can do this. You're going to see more of it. It took a week, and now it went from 2 to now 7 on the East Coast and West Coast of the United States. Second story, our favorite, speaking of trans people, non-binary energy secretary or assistant secretary Sam Britton, who is the guy that dresses like a girl and has the mustache with the lipstick and the shaved head, is involved in the disposition of, I guess, nuclear waste. It's a kind of important job, right? And this person is colorful, and apparently this colorful person who engages a lot of colorful activity also has, besides his proclivities, I guess it's his, I don't know, was it they, them? I don't know. This person, their proclivities, also likes to steal luggage. And so this person was charged by a police department for stealing some woman's luggage. She was seen taking it from an airport. Travels, didn't check luggage, went to the luggage carousel. They watched this person. He looked at the bag, put it back down, picked it, then he left with the bag, and the police contacted him and were like, dude, we know you've got this fucking bag. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And anyway, got scared, called him. So anyway, this got became national news because, reasons, right? Politics, Fox News, whatever. Well, some detective, I think in like Las Vegas, is like, hey, that looks like the dude that stole that bag 6 months ago in that case I was working on, and went back and checked the names and whatever, and they've got bammo. This person's now been apparently stolen another bag. And what's interesting is if you travel, the bags this person is stealing, Mr. Britton, are kind of higher quality bags. Like there's a company called Away, which are these fancy bags, or like, maybe like a Louis Vuitton bag, but he's not stealing he's stealing upper class bags with probably women's names on them, or fancy women that might have fancy clothes. And so I'm saying to myself, is this guy wearing this stuff? And if it doesn't fit, is he fencing this stuff? Does he have an eBay account? Does he have a PayPal account? Does he have Facebook Marketplace? Like, you could really very quickly go into this being a big old drama. So anyway, it's like, he's now been leave of absence, now permanently supposedly fired because, you get caught because there's cameras everywhere. Final story out of Las Vegas. A man, it's not stated in the article, but it is assumed, meets a woman in Las Vegas, probably a man of a certain age and a woman of a certain age, and they're together in his room. And at some point, I guess she had convinced him while they're snuggling, that's the way it was written, to take off his Rolex watch. I have a Rolex watch, and, maybe she's like, ooh, it's scratching me. I don't know what she told him, but, my watch can scratch you. So he takes off this Rolex watch and puts it under the pillow. At some point, he notices that the Rolex is gone. He's like, yeah, where's that Rolex at? Where's my goddamn watch at? And she gets all kinds of tense, freaks out, gets dressed, and runs out of the room because I think she's probably an escort. And so he's like, you stole my watch. And she's like, fuck you, I didn't steal anything. So she's running. He's chasing her. They make it down to the front of the hotel. Police are called, and, you know, they arrest her. Apparently she's got a rap sheet. They arrest her, take her down to intake, do the body cavity search, and they find it in her hoo-hoo. No, they find it in her vagina. So hoo-hoo isn't specific enough. So I guess the headline of the story is she snatched the Rolex. Well, that wraps up episode 282 of the John 1911 Podcast. If you want to see any more stories or pictures or links, please go to our website at John1911.com. That's JOHN1911.com. Remember, it's all about shooting guns and having fun. Everybody, have a good night. I'm so sorry. I'm by myself. I'm doing the best I can.